local recording is happening. Okay, I'm good to go when you are.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to Another Pass at Another Pass podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as I have been for the last couple of years, I am joined by Sam Alisea.
Hi.
So, Sam, we are continuing our little retrospective into the origins of the show.
Oh, we are.
Yeah.
We are. Yeah.
And this is an episode that I really was glad to get to. I was really excited for. Another Pass really came up right as I was finishing up a wave of doing Starship Farragut, which was the Star Trek fan film series that I'd been working on. So I wanted to get the people I had been working with on talking about Star Trek movies that I knew they would have a lot to talk about. So today, we are looking back on Star Trek 09.
Yeah. And can I just say, I'm going to preface this for anyone listening. If you enjoyed Star Trek 09, Paul is not, he's not with you.
No.
And I hope you were not triggered by that. I wasn't. I had kind of prepared myself going in, and I listened and I was like, wow, he hated this with the fire of 1,000 suns.
Yeah, and I knew that going into this episode. Yeah, so as you mentioned, so it's Paul Sieber, who was the writer for a lot of the Starship Farragut stuff that was my guest for this episode. And Paul is great. I love him. He definitely likes to get his opinions out there about a project. We have driven down multiple times to Kingsland, Georgia together, which is about a 12-hour drive. And it's a really dense conversation that whole way. Now, some of it is repeated because we'll just kind of circle around because Paul, like me, will, hit an idea and kind of come back to it later and a few times. But it's always a really engaging conversation, which is why I really wanted to have him on.
I think you can hear the passion for both of you. I think that we have a general rule, right? Like in our, we try to keep it as positive as we can. So I think if you're going back and listening to this and you've only listened to us in the last couple of years, just know that wasn't a rule yet. And and generally, we complain a little, but we try to also highlight great things.
Right.
And I think some of this that people are about to listen to becomes Case being like, true, counterpoint, interesting, and Case tries to bring it back, but it's again very early in the whole zeitgeist, the creation of this show and what it's going to be. And so I think I was like, Paul, he's got opinions, and they're not all wrong. Guys, they're not all wrong.
Yeah.
But it's just said with such authority and force. So just a warning at the top for anyone who liked this film.
Yeah, I always went with the goal of saying we're not going to be too angry. I really didn't want this to be a bitch fest. I wanted it to be a positive conversation, but it was so new. I wasn't quite used to really laying out the structure of we are trying to be explicitly positive about a work, even if we are pointing out its flaws. And that was the one area where I wish I had laid that out a little bit more. And I also was just kind of new. So when Paul got on a tear, it was hard for me because I was just new to hosting to be okay, well, I'm going to cut him off because I wasn't quite used to those kind of things. Not that,
Right.
I want to cut people off, but just guiding it was just something that was new to me in conversation.
Right. Yeah, just leading it in a new direction. And I will say there are a couple of sound weird things, but it's not horrible. So
yeah. So this one, there is some audio issues. We will get better, but we're going to get worse before we do. This one's not the worst of them, and that's coming up. Not the next episode because when I actually looked at the order, but it's coming pretty close. But yeah, we're still getting used to the audio equipment. And there was a thing I forgot to mention with the previous time. So the original Tascam I had to record with had this issue where it would glitch after 20-ish minutes of recording. And so we would have to pause and come back to it. And we actually lost a chunk because I didn't know about that. So we lost a round of close to our end stuff. It wasn't it was, we had gotten pretty far into it all, but we had gone just a little bit past what I thought was a safe zone for it, and we lost that chunk of audio where it just became corrupted. So you can really tell, especially because we had a hard out. So when we got the conclusion together really quickly, but it's gonna be pretty abrupt at the very end.
Yeah.
But with that, yeah, like I think that there's a lot of really good points brought up. I think Paul has articulates himself very well and makes very strong points for how to redo it.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you are a bigger fan of Star Trek '09, this is going to be a bit more negative. And I share a lot of those views, and I talk about this here. Like, there's a lot of things that aren't game breakers for me with '09 specifically that would be when we eventually get to Star Trek Into Darkness. But for Paul, they are like he's already lost it with this series. So
yeah, he's already so done. But I guess we should let him speak for himself, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Yeah, he's a very intelligent guy and a great writer. And let's listen to the third episode of Another Pass.
Woohoo!
Welcome to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in to Another Pass podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and today I'm by Paul Sieber.
Hello.
Now, Paul, you and I have known each other for several years working on Star Trek-related projects.
Yes.
Why don't you give a little background about some of the stuff you've done?
I got back into film work about 10 years ago, doing some set building for James Cawley's Star Trek New Voyages. Worked as an extra on that set, and then started working with John Broughton when he created Starship Farragut, which is another fan series. I've written 4 episodes of Farragut. I directed 2, and I've acted in several. And I did provided voice work for Starship Farragut, the animated series. I've also done voice work for a couple other fan-related Trek animated series, and contributed in other ways to a couple other Star Trek fan animated series. And I'm also a professional actor. I've been in movies like the recently released You're Effing Dead, and different films like Henchman's War, The Bride, for which I got my first acting nomination. Yay for me.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and a few other films like that. I've got about 60-some films so far.
So it's fair to say both that you know movies, but especially you know Star Trek.
Well, we're sitting here in my man cave. As you can see, we are completely surrounded by movie posters, cinema stuff, the biggest screen television I could possibly get without being a projector. Movie theater seats. I've got a popcorn machine.
And Star Trek phasers and
Star Trek
models.
phasers and models.
This is...
the phaser collection actually is pretty neat because those were all gifts from different Star Trek projects, mostly from John Broughton and Mike Bednar. At the Phaser 2 rifle that we did, that we created.
Oh, yeah, it's very cool.
I got a Brad Nelson phaser for the proposed reboot Star Trek series. It was going to happen before the Star Trek motion picture came out. They had redesigned the phaser, but Brad Nelson had done it. Mike Bednar detailed one of those. I have a prop phaser, which is a vacuum form that you can fall on and break. Then I've got a hero phaser.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, all good, nice gifts.
Yeah, no, I'm so jealous of this man cave right now. And that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to record down here
Yes.
while we are talking today about Star Trek, the 2009 reboot of the franchise. And I especially wanted to talk to you about it because you and I have very different opinions of this movie, but I think very similar reasons for our opinions. So the idea of the series is to do movies that could be good or could be bad, but definitely could be great some way, or could be at least a lot better. Okay. And you and I have very different thoughts about where this movie falls on that spectrum, but I think for similar reasons.
Yes.
Like, I like this movie. I think it's a good movie. I think it's exciting. It moves. It introduces the characters, at least a few of them, really well, and was a good start of the series. I think the series as a whole has been a mixed bag, but I thought, while it's not a perfect movie, there's a lot of logical fallacies. I thought it was overall worth my time and an enjoyable project.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I thought, now, I have to be very clear, I'm not against other people playing these characters. I'm not one of those people that's not out for a reboot. But I have one very strong belief when you create something based on an existing property, and I think I've said this to you before, but I'll say it again for the audience. If you're going to create something from an existing property, say a television show, a book, remaking another movie, a comic book, if it's based on something else, the first thing the writer, creator should do is actually watch the source material. Because if they don't watch or read the source material, they may miss the entire point of what it was. And that's what happened with the writers on 2009 Star Trek. They missed the point of what Star Trek was, and they got lazy. And I think the biggest problem with the film was poor writing. It wasn't reinventing the characters. I don't have a problem. I like Star Trek New Voyages. The people they have playing Kirk, Spock, McCoy. I like Star Trek Continues. People they have playing Kirk, Spock, McCoy. Other people can play these characters. As far as I'm concerned, it's not. It's like any other kind of literary character. How many people play James Bond? They can all play James Bond. They can all give it their own twist. Other people can play Kirk. I don't care. I thought the casting was good, but the writing is where the entire thing fell apart. I mean, it just fell apart. The writing.
I don't fully disagree, and I think we probably share a lot of the same complaints. It's just for me, they don't ruin the movie, but for you, I think it pushes it too far.
Well, I mean, it's some of the main premises. You know, if you're going to reboot the characters, then just do it. Just reboot them. This reboot, but then trying to tie it to the old universe thing to me was trying to say like, yeah, I'm going to salute you old Star Trek fans. At the same time, I'm going to say F you and not give you Star Trek.
Okay, so you have a problem with that.
I have a problem with that whole
I like the time warp
rather
part.
they just started it from scratch. For instance, look at Battlestar Galactica. When they started the new series, did it mention anything about the old series? No.
No, I mean it's a totally new thing.
It was a totally new thing. Was there a Commander Adama? Was there a Starbuck? Was there an Apollo? Yeah. Okay. Why didn't you just do that? They have to start with this whole thing. I have to reboot that universe, but I have to tie it in the old one. I didn't think you needed to do that. On top of that, there was that horrendous thing about what they were like as children. I really don't care. The thing that made the Star Wars prequels movies not work for me was I didn't give a damn what Anakin Skywalker was like when he was 9. I really don't care that Kirk was some smart-ass kid when he was 9 years old and stole his uncle's car. That really makes no sense. We all know the Spock story. He was little. They didn't like him because he wasn't a whole folk. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care about those characters till they're on.
But do those scenes really upset you to see them at all? Like I thought the Vulcan.
Annoying.
Okay, I thought the Spock scene was like, well, it's fine to see it. Yeah, and the part of the reason was they can set up the mom and like have that sort of like pathos later when she dies, like as opposed to just being a new character.
Yeah, but I mean, how did it do anything to make us know more about the character? Nothing. It really didn't. It didn't add to Spock's character to see when he was 9. It didn't add to Kirk's character to see when he stole the car. It didn't. You could have still had him be the bad boy when you had him joining the academy in the beginning of the movie. That didn't add to the character at all. They were useless scenes. You just threw in to say, hey, what were they like as kids? It's like J.J. Abrams had watched Star Wars and said, gee, we had to know about Anakin Skywalker when he was 9. I guess we have to know about these people when they were 9. They were trying to Star Wars it with that. And I just don't care. The thing is, I don't care about those characters till they're on that ship as the crew of the Enterprise. They could have started the movie with them just beginning the 5-year mission. They could have started it within the middle of the 5-year mission. I don't care, but I didn't want to see any of it till they were on that ship. Because up to that point, it's just a waste of time. How they all met, don't care.
Okay.
I wanted Star Trek. When the series started, they were on the ship. Did they have an episode where they first all came onto the ship and shook hands? One of the most boring episodes in Next Generation was Encounter at
Farpoint. Yeah, where...
Why? Because they had to introduce all these people. Hi, how you doing? Welcome aboard the ship. Hi, how you doing? Welcome aboard the ship. Hi, how you doing? Welcome aboard.
I also wanted to introduce the ship, though.
The ship. It's like, that's enough. They could have started it in the middle of a mission, like the original series did.
Go in media res and then just go from there.
And that was how we learned these people. We learned who they were from them doing something, not from a hi, how are you, welcome aboard for an hour.
Okay. Now, I mean, I'll say, I think this is, I think the structure worked fine for me because but it felt very much like Star Wars as a structure point. Like, and not the prequels, but like the original Star Wars movie. Like
it felt very Star Wars. It did not feel Trek. Like I said, it would have felt more like Trek had they started the story like with them during a mission. I mean, Star Trek pilot, both pilots, the one with Pike and the one with Kirk, both pilots for Star Trek didn't start with an intro of who were these people and welcome aboard the ship. They started in the middle of a mission. We're on our way doing this. And that was how we got to know who they were. If you watch the Menagerie or the Cage, whichever,
whichever version,
you know who Pike is by the end of that story. They have to introduce him like, hi, I'm Captain Pike. Welcome aboard the ship. Tell me about yourself. Here's a little thing on the screen telling me who you are. I mean, really, they didn't have to do any of that. The conversations with the characters in the episode defined Pike. Same thing with Kirk. His whole thing with Gary Mitchell, that defined who Kirk was in that episode without us having to go back and say, here's a welcome aboard. The fact that he had some issues with Spock because they hadn't been together that long yet. I know you've been on this ship for a while, Mr. Spock, but okay, so now we know Spock was there with the previous captain. Boom. These things were all established without an intro, how you doing, welcome aboard for the first time thing. And then we get into the silliness with how the characters got in their roles. Kirk never finished school, and now he's the captain.
Yeah, I would generally agree with this one.
Let's just go to one thing on that. Let's say you're Sulu in the 2009 movie. You graduated at the top of your class in the academy, right? 4 years. You graduate top of your class.
Possibly. I think they weren't super clear about that one.
They were pretty clear.
Well, because it seemed that they were supplementing or loading up the ship with cadets. So it was possible because, like, for example, Bones immediately was in the medical bay, like that he and everyone on the ship were cadets who were just like seniors or top-ranking students. Like they may not have graduated
the ranks
yet.
Don't make sense because
None of it
Sulu
makes sense.
was supposed to actually. This was not his rookie mission. He was a lieutenant already, not an ensign. Anyone right out of the academy would have been an ensign.
This is true.
Sulu was already a lieutenant.
But it appeared that everyone had ranks.
And they talked about the fact, well, that's my point. So
yeah, no, it doesn't make sense.
And I'm going to use Sulu for the example. Okay. So you're Sulu. You graduate near the top of your class. You rise to the rank of lieutenant in a very short amount of time. So you've been doing this job for a while. Here's a guy who never finished school, and he just gets made your captain. If you're Sulu, you give Starfleet the finger, go join the Merchant Marines. It doesn't work.
Okay.
And then for him to suddenly have loyalty to this guy who never paid the dues, no. I'm not buying that. See, that's the thing. I'm not buying that. It just he's captain because somebody just decided to give it to him at the end. It just no.
Yeah, I mean,
it just doesn't work.
Like Red Letter Media did a bit covering it where they pointed out that they seem to sort of intensify the military aspect of Starfleet, and I think this is true for all Star Trek movies. Like they always make it way more of a military organization, and they use terminology that sounds much more like common man grunt stuff. Like if you think about it, it's like enlist in Starfleet. This is like it makes it seem like everyone is an enlisted man and like fairly like blue collar until all of a sudden they're in these positions of authority. And this movie, I think, does the worst job of it because it's sort of the same way for all the others. They make it much more like here we're a military organization as opposed to an exploration organization or a science organization. You know, we've got the same people who are like your basic guards are going into the same classes and doing everything else with the guy who's the captain, which that's crazy. Like it's not how it plays out in any actual vessel, and it's not how it played out in the show. We have characters like Miles O'Brien on Next Gen and Deep Space Nine, who was an enlisted man and got as far as you can get as an enlisted man. Like you can be a high-ranking person, but you're not going to be the person who's in charge of everything. And the only reason that you're high-ranking is because you have like specialty in a particular location.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
See, the ranking thing with me, that was just annoying, but that was just the start.
So you were basically saying like this would be better to start with them on the ship because then you can bypass a lot of the Academy stuff. Even though clearly they wanted to show the Kobayashi Maru, they wanted to show like Kirk joining Starfleet. They wanted to show these things because it was a movie that had never been done in a movie before, and they wanted to create a movie.
The Maru had been done in a movie before. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan.
Yeah,
we saw the Kobayashi.
Or rather, they wanted to show Kirk do it.
Yeah, but even the way they showed Kirk do it, it didn't match up.
It didn't perfectly, no, but
work. It just, and the whole thing too was, changing like little silly thing. They're trying to salute Star Trek with the same thing, making him called Bones because my wife divorced me, left me with nothing but my bones. No, it was Sawbones, meaning doctor from the West, because
right, it's an old term.
Originally supposed to be a Western. That was where Bones came from. Did you suddenly have to change that? For what reason?
I think they were trying to translate things to a modern audience.
Why? Something.
But that was the purpose of the movie.
And then all of a sudden change all the lingo and say LOL. Some cowboy saying LOL. I mean, why would you do that? Yeah, it's modern lingo, but it doesn't necessarily fit what you're doing.
But you got to remember, this is the 2009 movie was trying to relaunch the franchise for a modern audience.
Then that goes back to my original statement. Then don't do what you did and try to do the same where you're trying to make it the old show, but the new show. Just reboot the damn thing. Start it from scratch. This is their first day on the ship, new mission, new crew. Change what you need to from there. Do what Battlestar Galactica did.
Let's talk about some of the things that are in the movie beyond just the general concept of it. Let's start with the opening scene. I really like the opening scene, and here's the big reason why I think it's a thing that deserves to stay in, and why I tend to like the reboot or the time travel reboot aspect of it. My fiance, who does not really care about Star Trek, never had seen any Star Trek before we started dating. We went and saw that movie, and she was bawling at the end of that scene. And I think that it's sort of it's a cheap emotional grab right there.
Yeah.
But it does a really good job of getting people who aren't into this world, into the emotions of the characters. And I thought that for introducing the concept of like, okay, things are different, and now we have a hook for why we should.
Why? Why do things have to be different? Why couldn't you just have started? Here's the thing. Is this a movie about Kirk, Spock, and McCoy? That's the central three people to Star Trek, right? That's what it's supposed to be.
I don't think this movie
Original
is.
series.
I think this movie is about Kirk and Spock, and McCoy is Kirk's right-hand man,
Okay,
and then
then that's
Uhura
fine.
is Spock's right-hand lady.
And okay, that's fine. You want to do that? That's fine. The only purpose of that opening scene was to establish, hey, Trek fans, this is Star Trek. Alternate universe. Ha, 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 ha. That's all that was for. That's the only purpose it served. It served no purpose. It didn't drive the only part of the story that it drove was the part of the story I don't like. Don't like that premise.
So let's move on. Let's talk about Nero as a
Waste
villain.
of time. Terrible villain.
I think he was not built up enough. I was fine with him being kind of crazed by the destruction of Romulus. I would have liked him to be more consistent with
My
it.
planet's destroyed. I go back in time, and then I do two things. One, I do nothing to prevent my planet from getting destroyed or save its people. And then two, I take revenge on someone who had nothing to do with it.
Well, the reason why Romulus was destroyed doesn't make sense for him to be on a quest against the Federation. If the Federation was responsible for Romulus being destroyed, maybe that would have made more
Even
sense
if
then.
that's what he thought. He doesn't try to go after anyone who did it. He doesn't try to save his people. And then he goes to take revenge on Kirk, who had nothing to do with it. Matter of fact, Kirk's long dead by the time Romulus blows up. What is the point of his vengeance? There is no point to his vengeance, which makes it a useless vengeance. Khan had vengeance for a reason in Wrath of Khan. There was a reason he wanted to go after Kirk. There's a reason he wanted to get even with these people. It was justified in his mind, but enough to make the character work as a villain. Spider-Man 2. The death of his wife and his desire to see his life's work as his dream, that's what made Dr. Octopus a good villain. It was that drive from the goal in his mind. This villain was a terrible villain.
All right, so let's say we're about to start shooting. The script has been written. You can do rewrites on it, but a lot of the sets have already been built, and you can only, and like I said, they're about to start shooting. It's been cast. You can cut some scenes. You can get rid of some actors. Movies work that way. You can do some reshoots even if you really need to do dramatic ones. But what changes are you going to make that a better villain? Because you're not going to completely get rid of him.
First off, I would have said to have some way, there's some reason you'd have Nero either blame the Federation or someone in particular. Maybe even somehow something Kirk did long term that had happened in the past for why Romulus was destroyed. This would give him a reason to go into the past and want to go after, specifically after Kirk. I'm going to keep him from getting born. He gets born. I'm going to go after him again later. It would at least give us some justification for why he was doing this, to give him some kind of a vengeance. The other thing, too, is to make the main thing that the villains are using for their weaponry, for this big thing. I understand it's a mining ship, and that's what the drill and everything, but their whole big thing, this red matter thing like that, it didn't work. The logic was off. Rewrite the script with some logic. I have this stuff called red matter. One drop will blow up a planet, right? That's what they say.
consume a planet, yeah.
Consume a planet. Okay. Let's start with that. I have this. This is pretty deadly stuff. First off, then I should have a small beaker of it, because that'd be enough to destroy a galaxy. To have a tank with 10,000 gallons of it and be showing that, that's the universe would blow up. How would you have acquired this much universe-destroying material? It didn't make sense.
Yeah, it should have been like the dark matter in Futurama.
Something small, yeah.
Like a little nibbler nugget.
It's so precious. If one drop can destroy a planet, it'd be incredibly precious. Making a tank of 10,000 gallons of it, it's no longer precious. It's not like there's just crap loads of it sitting around. That's number one.
Okay.
So it doesn't make their weaponry thing. Number two, one drop destroys a planet. Why do I have to drill the hole? Throw the drop at the planet. Put it in some device, have it explode on the planet, the drop. That's enough to destroy the planet.
Yeah, it seemed to be a little...
Why do I need...
The drill, I thought, was a good dramatic device.
It served no purpose.
Ultimately for the weapon that they had. If it was
It
something
served
where...
no purpose.
If it was something that could disrupt...
It only did it so they could have a big dramatic scene of people parachuting down to fight on top of the drill. And then that goes with the second thing. The drill is a thing. The drill's hanging on a tether. We have to stop the drill. Shoot the tether. Cut the tether. Why is
They do later.
But why is there a gigantic sword fight on it instead of just cutting the damn tether?
Yeah, I mean, well, they do later. Like they shoot
But
it down
they
later
do
when
later.
it's
See, my point
that's
is
what I'm agreeing.
they do it
I'm saying
later.
so.
Why
Not do it the first time?
place? Doesn't make sense. So then we've got two things. Well, there's actually three things now about this red matter that doesn't make sense. And then let's go with the last part of it. At the end, when they destroy his ship, there's 10,000 gallons of this red matter on it. The galaxy should be gone. You just blew up.
Yeah, I mean, even if it was, there's an argument of how far it could spread. Like they're in Earth's solar system at that point, and yeah, it's pretty bad.
So your main plot device, this red matter,
Right.
and using this and so forth, doesn't make sense. It just doesn't. It does. No one thought it through. And I'm sorry, when you're dealing with things like Star Trek, a lot of times the reason shows like that have gone in, and people have talked about the influence Star Trek's had on things like science and so forth, because people who grew up watching Trek became scientists, invented iPads and flip phones and so forth, which means you have an educated audience that likes these kind of shows.
Well, the show does.
Yeah.
The argument could be made that the movie is trying to appeal to a broader audience.
So you make it dumb. So you take out any intelligence whatsoever in what your main plot device
Optimally,
is.
you keep it smart, but have it be accessible.
Make it smart but accessible, but taking out the intelligence of those things by making your main plot device just plain not work. Huh? Where's the logic in that? It doesn't work when you dumb down your main plot device. So the vengeance thing doesn't work because there's no logical reason for this vengeance. And I love the one thing I kept getting told by people when I would point that out. Well, if you read the comic book ahead of time, it tells you.
I hate that argument. I hate that argument. The comic actually ruined one of the things I liked about it, which was that their mining ship was, because it's 100 years in the future, and it seemed to have these like jury-rigged missiles based on like stuff that they used for mining. Was more advanced than the warships of that time. I like that detail because it shows the shift in technology. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, but it's using Borg technology, and it's like, why does everything have to be the Borg? What, like, it's literally like, we're going to take the two villains people know about, Romulans and the Borg. We're missing the Klingons, but okay, whatever. And then we're going to mash them together, and they're going to be the villains.
And then we get back to some other stuff too that we're going to just go into this reboot universe. The fact that they're saying that this is the same people, but in an alternate version of the reality. That wouldn't change the physiology of people. Why do the Romulans no longer look like the Romulans did? Why are they now bald with tattooed heads?
I took it that they
never
tattooed themselves and that they had shaved heads.
We never saw Romulans that ever looked like that before.
We didn't see that. We didn't see that many lower class Romulans.
I'm not saying you can't improve makeup and so forth, but what they did was they entirely changed it. But you're telling me this isn't. See, this is where I have the problem with. You can go ahead and entirely change that makeup if you're rebooting the universe from scratch, period. But when you're saying it's still tied to the original universe with the original character, and it's just an alternate timeline.
But you know what I'm going to say in response.
All of a sudden you change the physiology of people that would take hundreds of generations.
Yeah, but you know what I'm going to respond with, which is that the Star Trek the Motion Picture entirely changed the physiology of the Klingons.
I don't disagree with you, and I always had an issue with that. But you're also talking about the physiology from a television show in the 1960s that didn't have the makeup.
Right, into the 70s. Yeah.
Okay, we've now established how Romulans have looked through Star Trek The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, so forth, and multiple films.
Right. I mean, the argument...
And now you're suddenly going to say it's the same people, the same races, a different timeline. Well, that timeline should have had to have reset about 10,000 years back to make those
Romulans are also from the original timeline. So they're not even dealing with the time change.
So that makes even less sense.
I mean, I know what they have said is that they wanted the Romulans to look more like the Vulcans. And I've always felt that the Vulcans should look more like the Romulans. I've always felt that Spock shouldn't be what we use as an example of a Vulcan, because Spock is a half Vulcan. And we always use, I've always liked the idea that like maybe pure-blooded Vulcans, they never show it, but should look more akin to the Romulans. Like have a little bit more of the ridges, have like even like.
See, I never liked when they started like, on Next Generation.
Oh, I don't want it to be like huge ridges, but like a little
big forehead they put on everybody, because all they did on Next Generation for makeup, it's an alien. We have to give them either some kind of a wrinkly nose or a big forehead.
Right.
Because it was like the only two makeup kits they had were wrinkly noses and big foreheads. I used to think that was the biggest cop out on that show. It's kind of like, what kind of a big wrinkly forehead nose combo can we give this week? And there was only so many that they put little veins in it, they put little things to make the eyebrows go funny. It was always just like, what's the forehead? I used to make the joke, it's the forehead of the week.
You know? Yeah, no, well, I mean, the Star Trek
really
foreheads is
Star Trek, so it was the forehead of the week, you know. So, I'll say in the movies, if you want to enhance the makeup, you know, but the thing was, it wasn't like you were going from the original series to the movies and they changed the Klingons. That was actually kind of different and a lot more forgivable, because we're really talking about two different formats. But when you talk about changing those Romulans now, it's just like kind of like you're really telling me this isn't the same people, just in a different timeline. This is an entirely different universe because physiology isn't the same. So then, if it is an entirely different universe, if it is a complete reboot, then why do you need Leonard Nimoy? And he was a gigantic waste of time. It didn't make sense. And blowing up Vulcan didn't make sense. And then we get down into those little plot points. They blow up Vulcan, but he can see from this next planet. How close are these planets to each other? Then during the movie, they make the other big plot device they come up with. I can beam into a ship light years away at warp speed.
Oh, yeah, this is the beginning of the big problems I have.
And then that actually carries over into the next film.
Oh, yeah, the next movie is where it gets bad.
My whole thing comes down to this kind of thing. Why do you need a starship anymore? You no longer need starships. Because now you can beam to the other end of the galaxy. Why do you need a starship?
You know, that was part of an idea when they were first talking about Next Gen, making it so that no one had ships and they just beamed from place to place. And they immediately got rid of that idea because it's crazy.
Yeah. But here they do it. So my whole thing is in this movie is just like, what's the point? So the thing is, if you have that capability, you've now taken everything out of Crisis. Because I'm not even going to get into Star Trek Beyond. Or, you know, the thing you have with that is when they got into that crisis situation, they could have just beamed everybody back to Earth.
True.
Because if you have that technology, wouldn't you have that as an emergency? Why do you need, like, escape pods or anything like that? Have it beam everyone back home.
It's true. I mean, I think especially once that becomes standard.
But you made it standard by the end of this film, and then in the next movie, you made it even more commonplace. The fact that a transporter that could do that could fit into a briefcase. Come on now.
Yeah.
If that's that simple, imagine a system you could have built into your starship. You just beam your starship to a location you don't really need. Then you have little motors so you can putter around. You know that? You beam the whole ship back to Earth.
All right, but again, so what would you do to fix this? I
would never have made that beaming thing. I would
totally would cut that out. So we start them as
red matter. I'd have made it more precious. That maybe I would have done something like
tiny vial. That ship only works with like small amount that you have, and every time you use it,
some other mechanism to set it off. Not this drill a hole kind of thing. Like I have to have it like drip onto a piece of dilithium crystal.
Well, what if you showed it? What if you showed what happens if it just hits something where it creates a giant crater, but it doesn't actually destroy the planet? Like if it was.
Well, if it's enough of a giant crater that would make a whole planet be dead, what difference would it make? Whether the planet physically disappeared or you killed everything on it?
No. Giant crater, like maybe it takes out like a country, but not necessarily a continent.
One drop
so it's like a bomb.
Can destroy a planet.
If it was correctly placed, I'm saying, like, what if they showed it so it was not as effective as what we're saying?
You drop 10 drops. You still had 100,000.
Yeah.
Again, you still had 100,000 gallons. Seed a cloud with it and rain it on the planet. I mean, that would have been. The point is,
it's that J.J. Abrams wanted to make Star Wars before he could make Star Wars, and so he wanted a Death Star that could blow up a planet with a laser gun. And then, okay. Yep. All right. So.
And then he wanted to create a scene so people could have a lightsaber fight. So he had them have to like parachute down so they could have a sword fight on top of the drill.
Yeah, and the funny one with that,
J.J. Abrams was trying to make a Star Wars movie out of Star Trek.
Yeah, the funny one with that was that when they did the Sulu fencing scene in the original series, Takei came out being like, "Hey, I'm an Asian American in the current era who likes fencing and doesn't like katanas. I don't see why an Asian American in the future or a person of Japanese descent in the future would automatically go katana." And then they do the katana in the 2009 movie instead of a rapier.
Well, that was the whole thing, too. Takei was trained as a fencer in college. So to him, it was like they wanted him originally to use a katana, and he said, I don't know how to use that. So he even made the point when they got into the movies that, yes, he was of Asian descent, but he was born in San Francisco. He was an American. He wasn't, he may be a Japanese American or whatever they would call it in that future time. But the point was, he wasn't some guy from Japan. He wasn't some guy from any place in Asia. He was born in San Francisco.
Right.
So that makes it even more so, you know, if you're going to look at that kind of an emphasis. You know, have him with a katana. It's like, because that's real common in San Francisco. You know.
I think I generally liked the majority of the ship. I didn't like that they built it on Earth. I thought that was stupid, and that
Physics-wise, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's too much, all the weight, the energy it would take, the gravity. It's not supposed to be an atmospheric vessel. It's not in any way aerodynamic. So building it on the ground, taking it up, doesn't make. I mean, the International Space Station we built in orbit.
Right.
They took it up piece at a time.
So I think that was dumb. Like they wanted to have that like trailer shot of like it being built, but it could have just as easily been done in space. But they liked the idea of like him sitting on a motorcycle, like looking up. Yeah. But then, and Abrams loves that kind of shot because like there's almost an identical one in Force Awakens with Rey and like the broken Star Destroyer.
Exactly. She's on her speeder thing. And there's the broken Star. Yeah.
Yeah. So he liked that kind of shot, and I get why he did it. I think it's dumb. It would have been fine even if it was like parts were being assembled and then being shipped up into space, but the full ship, like if it was like, oh, we're building a nacelle and that's being sent out, like, or something, and like now like the inside of the ship. I mean, we like the bridge. It's huge. It looks like a Mac store.
It's too. To me, it looks like an Apple store. It's too big. It's too busy. Too many lights and too much stuff going on. Too many people on there. It takes away from the focus on the main characters. When you have 60 people on the bridge and 100 bridge stations, and they're all got flashy lights and stuff going off everywhere. There's too much going on. Plus, the costumes. Now, the costumes were intended to salute the original series. I appreciate that. At the same time, there's a reason why when they went to the movies, they didn't use those costumes. They don't look good on screen. They look like pajamas. I don't care how much you try to modernize them, they still look like pajamas. But part of the reason they worked it was those color costumes on a gray, simple background. The bridge had that gray, dull color to it, very more military, and those costumes popped to really see the actors. Those costumes in that silver and white environment didn't go together. It was odd.
Right, but I do.
It looked really bad. It was way too much technology. And apparently Abrams really has wood for how many different lights and flashy things he can do, and interior lens flares. Every time you turn your head, lens flare in the eye. It isn't bad.
But that's kind of the language of how he does the future, where it's like it's bright and it's shiny, and the lens flare is like part of that whole like this.
You could have limited it.
It's the bright shiny future is what he was trying to tell, and I think he went too far. But would you ever not get that?
Show this group trying to be when you're creating them to look like a military organization. To the point where you have in the academy, you have them dressed like Nazi foot soldiers. Yeah, you suddenly get on the ship and it's bright, happy, shiny future.
Yeah.
But before that, it was the German military. I mean, it just doesn't go. The two things don't go together. Wouldn't that look if the academy was so utilitarian? Why is the ship not utilitarian?
Yeah, and they definitely treat the academy as very like militarized versus what.
Okay, that's fine. If you want to go that route, which we kind of got that feeling in Rathacon, then go that route and let's make the ship look a little more practical. That's not practical in any way, shape, or form. It's terrible. But hey, that's just me. And it was too big. The ship overall.
Oh yeah, it was way too big. They like try to make it the Galaxy class ship size for no apparent reason. I mean,
there's no reason why we couldn't still have a ship with like under 400 people. I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't see one reason why we had to just so we could say it.
Like Voyager was in the same ballpark, maybe a little smaller, somewhere definitely fewer people on the ship.
You didn't have to say, you don't have to suddenly say, well, our ship is bigger. We're just saying.
Yeah, it was just dumb. It was like, well, of course the Galaxy class ship is bigger. It's 100 years in the future and way more advanced and designed for a different purpose. And by the end of Next Gen, it basically is agreed that the Galaxy class ship is not a great ship for most of its purposes.
Got rid of that idea.
Yeah, it was too big. It was from a time of peace where they encountered no like hostile forces. So by the second you meet the Borg, you're like, this ship's not built the way we need it to be built.
E doesn't look anything like it.
No,
it's
it's
smaller and more streamlined.
Exactly.
I mean, it just the ship was overwieldy. The engines were overwieldy in their shape. They were just it didn't go. To me, the most beautiful version of the Enterprise, and Star Trek fans will probably get mad at me for it, was Star Trek the Motion Picture. I loved the way that Enterprise looked. It had a better feel to it than obviously. It was technology they had when they did the TV shows. But the motion picture...
Yeah, the motion picture looked great.
It's a great-looking vessel. I never liked Enterprise D. I always thought it was terrible. So unwieldy looking with that massive saucer hanging over.
I got what they were going for with it.
I get what they were doing for it, but like too many windows.
Yeah, I mean, they really wanted to set it apart from the classic series one. But like still the same shape.
So to me, I'm not a huge fan of the ship, but I could live with the ship, except for the fact, like I said, the engine room is a brewery.
Yeah,
I mean, it was nice that they had a practical set, but it was like,
at the same time, all those pipes doesn't make any sense. This is a warp drive vessel.
oh, it's for
Piping
it's for
fuel and
it's
steam and stuff all over.
oh, it's for piping space stuff and other space stuff. Like,
Trapped in a pipe and go, oh no, I'm trapped in a pipe.
all right, so let's talk about making it a practical movie. So, movies about to be made. We can do some basic rewrites. We can sort of fix the character of Nero, but we really can't completely get rid of him because Eric Bana has been cast.
Okay, the fixes for this simple are pretty straightforward and basic. You have to eliminate where we have the problems. The red matter problem.
All right, that could be a CGI thing. Like if you make like a nibbler nugget with the red matter.
Yeah, but you got the villain motivation problem. You got the weapon problem. You've got the once again the biggest problem with the entire film comes down to how it was written. I'm not going to take anything from actors, sets. It all comes down to how it was written. So simply doing this, if you have to have the time travel thing, and I'll say have to, you say that in the future, you say something happens either, particularly because of some decision Kirk made when he was the commander of the Enterprise, some decision he made, say letting some alien race go or something.
Or some
like
doomsday weapon.
Or some doomsday weapon or something along those lines is why Romulus is destroyed. So when Nero comes back in time, it's specifically to kill Kirk before he's born so that he can't cause this thing to happen. And then the big surprise should be that we don't know why he's come back in time right off the bat and destroying this other ship. And then we find out that the guy he killed was George Kirk and the baby that was just born was named Jim.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this would be fun. Yeah,
thing there, right? Cut. Something. Nero's ship is damaged. It does a tumble off into space, like Darth Vader's TIE fighter.
Right, because he loves Star Wars.
Space. Cut forward in time. We're on the Enterprise. It's year 1 or year 2 of the 5-year mission. Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, boom. They're on the ship. They're on a mission to do a certain thing. That's when we bring Nero
Now,
back.
I like Pike. I wouldn't have a problem with Kirk not being the first, or not being the captain, and having.
It's not about Captain Pike. There's a reason they got rid of Captain Pike when they did the first.
But if the movie opens with him being the captain, and they want to show an arc of Kirk,
because I don't give a damn. Star Trek is about Captain Kirk, Mr. Spock, and Dr. McCoy. That's what Star Trek is. It's like starting a movie about Santa Claus, and our big emphasis is on Mrs. Claus. She's done, and her, and like.
She's a badass lady. You don't
show Santa till like 3/4 of the way into the film, but the movie's about Santa.
No, the movie could be about Kirk, but
we don't need
no Pike. Okay,
Pike is not Star Trek. There's a reason they wrote the character out after they created the initial pilot because the character didn't work for the show. They wrote it out and they created Kirk.
Okay, fair enough.
The only reason we ever saw Pike is because it was a writer's strike and they rehashed that episode to make a 2-parter.
In a way that was better than the original episode.
Better than the original episode that was Mallet.
Yeah.
Yes. So put that.
All right, fair.
So we cut in. They're on some kind of a mission, doing some kind of thing. Then we bring the Nero back. We have the whole confrontation happen with Nero. We find out Nero's motivation now. Romulus was destroyed because of you did this, Kirk. And then we have Chris Pine like, I haven't done that yet. You know, the kind of thing. How can you blame me for something I haven't done?
It's like a twist on.
We can change this together. Nero's like, no, the only way to change it is to kill you before you do it. We can have some kind. We've got a vengeance thing. We've got a motivation for the villain. And the red matter. The red matter's precious. There's only a few drops of it in the universe. And he has them. I'm going to take one of those drops, Kirk, and I'm going to throw it at the earth. And there's something it can do. And now the red matter becomes a good plot device. Kirk's like, I can get this red matter off of him. You know, and then he blows up the chip at the end. The Enterprise has to get away because he's got 3 drops of red matter, and that will take out a solar system, you know, kind of a thing. Now the weapon becomes an issue. Mm-hmm. So we've got all that motivation. At the end, when they're having their final battle with Nero, this other ship comes through this time vortex and starts shooting at Nero, and Nero disables it. And finally, they blow up Nero's ship. They grab that ship with the tractor beam. They pull away really fast. They pull that ship into the cargo bay. They open it up. It's Leonard Nimoy, and he looks at Chris Pine and goes, Jim? Boom! Bang! End of story.
Now, do you think it should be right at the end, like a Deus Ex Machina, or maybe show up a little bit earlier?
The last scene we did, where they're all recovered. It's like, sure, we pulled that ship on board. It helped us. God damn, let's see what's going on. Who's the pilot of that thing? And that's when we get to see Leonard Nimoy. Boom. Okay, so they're on a mission. And then all of a sudden we have Nero show up, and he starts attacking the Enterprise. And Kirk's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" So we have boom, and some back and forth battles going. They're really going at each other. Kind of thing. Nero says, "It's because of you. You did this, and my planet was destroyed." And Kirk's like, "I haven't done that. How can you blame me for something I haven't done yet? We can change history." And Kirk tries to be the diplomat, try to make it work together. Nero's like, "No," and they keep fighting, and they get to a couple. Boom, got some cat and mouse stuff. You got all that great pew 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 stuff, but we still got a story. You do all that kind of stuff, and you finally get toward the end. They're having the big final battle. Remember, we've got the red matter now. Now red matter is precious. There's only 3 drops known to exist in the universe, and Nero has all 3. And he's going to throw one at the Earth and blow the Earth up. And Kirk has to stop them. They're trying to go back toward Earth, and they're having a big fight. A time vortex up. This other ship comes out, and he helps Kirk, and they boom, they blow up Nero. And they have to get away because he got 3 drops of red matter. It takes out a star system. Boom, so they finally get out of there. They tractor beam the other ship, and they pull out, and they're all, rescued. And they Captain, we pulled that pod on board. It's like, I got to see who's the captain of that thing. They pull on board, and they open up the pod, and Leonard Nimoy comes out and goes, "Jim," end of the movie. Drama, excitement. You can keep all your pew, pew, pew stuff in there. You can do your alternate universe, and then that could be when we could have, in the next movie, we could have Spock realize that, hey, your dad didn't originally die in that mission. Some things are different.
They don't spell it out as much for the audience.
At the very beginning of the film, this is it, because they kept doing this. It's Star Trek, but remember it's a different timeline. It's Star Trek, but remember it's a different timeline. It's Star Trek, but remember it's a different timeline. Then you could use Spock for saying, you could even use that element saying how that may have changed other things too, because the timeline gets warped and twisted, and maybe other things. I won't know as much, about what's going to happen, kind of a thing, because things have been changed.
Well, yeah, that opens up the ability to make those twists, but like a couple
change things like alien physiology and so forth. You could explain it that way, but they didn't. So that kind of couple little changes. Now you've suddenly got a much better plot, tighter story. You got more action, less to cutting out that entire Academy childhood thing. I mean, come on, cut that whole piece out. Now you've got an exciting film.
All right, that sounds like a really good pitch. I think I don't really think I can add a whole lot to it. I don't hate some of the stuff from the earlier scenes, but I think if you're gonna chop it down or like cut it down, like just make it just a tight, fast moving movie, I think that sounds like a really good idea to go with.
Wrath of Khan's a great example. How much time did we spend on the Kirk feeling old stuff in the beginning of the movie?
Couple minutes. Yeah.
But it was enough to establish it, right? They did establish it.
Yeah, they harken back to it a couple of times, but it's not.
Back to it, but they established it.
Yeah, it's maybe 15 minutes total in the movie.
The having to need the glasses. That was it was only 5 minutes of the film, but it really established something. And then that played out because of that whole thing with him feeling old. Wasn't there a great drama when, after the battle, when he was in his room and before David came in, and he threw the glasses down on the table and the lenses were broken. I mean, there's an impact and emotion in that scene just from seeing that broken lens.
Yeah, there's definitely
it's simple. See, that's what's good filmmaking, when you can do something, but there's an impact to that broken lens. That broken lens means something, and that.
And we don't have a moment like that in the current 2009 movie.
And that was part of the problem. It was because they started the movie the way they did, which is why when you get into Darkness, I'm not believing.
Well, Into Darkness was just a meandering, weird mess. But what I'm saying that's another time.
But if you start it with Kirk and Spock as friends, by starting this movie with their midway into the mission, okay?
Right.
Then we can say that friendship exists, and we can show things to make people believe in that friendship. When you got into Darkness, the whole thing was they were trying to force us to say, don't you know they're friends now? They're really great friends now. And I saw, A, nothing that showed me they were friends, and B, nothing between them seemed like friends. So you needed to create that friendship in the first movie, and you didn't. So if you have it just be part of the first film that they're already friends, then I think you could have got away with a little bit.
Yeah, especially if it's at first a positive relationship of respect that pushes it in because through adversity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, you could have done a lot with that, in this movie, but you could have established that they were already friends when it started. I mean, they established that Uhura and Spock already had a relationship, right?
It's true.
Did the relationship have to get created in the story? Or did they already have one? Yeah, they already had it. It was already there. Then they acknowledged it, and then they moved into the story saying, yeah, it was tough for them because of their different, and that's fine. They could have had Kirk and Spock already be friends and then talk about maybe that friendship would get tested or something. But doing the way they wrote it, they said that we're going to show you how they became friends, and they never did.
No.
Never bothered. They never showed
So
me where that friendship would have come from.
we actually want to show a few things more. I think you've given some really good notes about how to make this a better movie. I wish it was one where we could edit the movie into a better position, but they don't have the scenes to do it. Well, Paul, thank you so much for talking about this.
You're welcome.
I wish I could have you here next time when we talk about Highlander 2: The Quickening. But until next time, stay scruffy, my nerf herders.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View's Another Pass podcast. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe and review the show on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com.
And we're back. So it's really interesting to listen back on this episode, especially because there's audio issues and that kind of sucks. And I can hear, for me at least, like where it's like clear that we cut and came back to recording, and especially the chunk that we had to redo at the end.
It must be like the ghosts haunting you of your tech past. Oh my God, this is what's happened. Case, this is where you didn't remember and we lost the thread.
So Sam, what was your take on this all? I mean, like, I know you're also a big Star Trek fan. We've done a bunch of Star Trek stuff since you've come on the show.
Yeah.
But this was, we hit so much early on because I was actively working with, like, people had pretty good social media presences because of Star Trek fan film stuff that I wanted to get them on.
Right.
So we did a lot of Star Trek early. And as a result...
Right. There was less for us to do.
Exactly. Less for us to do together. So this is a big one I wanted you to actually be able to chime in on.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was definitely not as harsh at all as Paul. I felt like this is a very classic, like, J.J. Abrams thing, is to, like, do a reboot that's kind of just like the other thing. And like, don't get me wrong, he's so good in his scope and, like, the way that he works things, but J.J. has big ideas and doesn't always land, like, stick the ending, which is like my big thing with him anytime he directs. It's
right.
Like, oh, amazing big ideas, grand scope, beautiful scenes. Oh, okay, well, I guess this is where we're gonna go. And so, like, in general, when I saw this movie in the theaters, I rather enjoyed it. I think Paul definitely agreed and admitted, and I agree with him. This was actually very well casted. Like, I think that the cast is fun, and I think that they were well picked for these roles that are kind of, like, well, very iconic, right, in the background. It's not easy to do, right, because the fandom is, especially with these particular characters, they're so precious. So I felt like at least in that way they did a good job. I, unlike Paul, did not mind having a little background story for these characters or even their child selves, because I do think that in terms of the narrative of the movie, it does serve us later on. And I also think that you are correct in saying, when you say that, when you kind of do your counterpoint, that this movie was made to kind of give some fan service, but also try to bring more people into the fold, which I don't mind. Like, I don't mind that stuff. I don't think that it's, like, necessarily bad. I do absolutely agree with Paul that I did not feel that the villain was very strong. Like, I don't necessarily believe that his reasoning wasn't good. I just feel like your planet dying, pretty bad, right? But there's somewhere with the connecting the dots, and there's somewhere where it falls flat in the writing, and you don't really, like, feel the full brunt of loss in the same way that I feel like you ought to, because it's such a shitty situation, right? It's such a terrible thing. But in general, this is a movie that's, like, it's fun, but flawed. Does it have repercussions into the other movies that were not great? Yes.
Yep.
But like, in terms of this film, I left the movie theater enjoying it, and when I have rewatched it, I have genuinely enjoyed it. Like, I've enjoyed, like, the dumb jokes and things like that. I haven't had a problem with that stuff. And I actually thought it was really funny that Paul was upset about Bones' joke about his wife leaving him nothing.
Right.
I thought that was really funny. I was like, that's like, I mean, I guess if that's the hill you want to die on, that's a weird hill. But I actually thought it was funny because I was just like, yeah, you're right. It is Sawbones, but I feel like it's okay to play on both. But I was just like, yeah, like, I get it, man. I get it. Like, he's a doctor. He's a doctor, Jim.
Yeah. I mean, like, this movie is so flawed just across the board, but it has a lot of momentum. And I think that's the thing about this movie, which is that every single spot in it, there's like a wait, what moment going on somewhere there. And at the same time, it keeps on rushing around and you're caught up. You're like swept up in all this motion that you're like, okay, cool. Yeah. And at the end, I'm very excited. Now, part of that is also, it's the first Star Trek movie in a really long time at the point it came out. And it's also, you know, going back to the original cast, or not the original cast, but the original characters and like playing around with that. And I like the time travel thing in terms of it being like, that's my jam. And I think it's very part of Star Trek to do time travel stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, like, I know that Paul was like, why bring Leonard Nimoy now? Because we love it. Because fan service. Because J.J. Abrams is the best at fan service.
Yeah, because, like, I don't actually really like J.J. Abrams as a director across the board. I think that, but I do think that he composes a shot well in terms of giving you an emotion to feel, and that's really good. And I think that this movie is fine, and particularly coming off of both Nemesis and before that Insurrection, like, you know what? It's fine. Like, we hadn't seen a big Star Trek movie in a while. Like, there's a lot to love just because of that. And that's a big reason why for Into Darkness, like it had faded by the time we get to that movie. Like, this one doesn't make a lot of sense, but you're like kind of just enjoying the whole, like, the totality of it versus the movie, the next movie, like, all those head scratching moments actually kind of cause it to grind to a halt.
Yeah, agreed. And again, the pacing really helps, right? Because if you're in the theater, it's huge and it's moving fast, and all these scenes that are so, like, you know, crazy and like amazing looking, and it's adventure, and Kirk is the ultimate daredevil, and you're like, yeah, you know, you're just having fun, and then you rewatch it and you're like, wait, why didn't they? Right. But they could have. Yep. Okay, but why did he?
Exactly.
But, okay, question. And then you're like, you know what? I'm not going to ask these questions. And then you get to the next movie and you're like, no. No, this doesn't make sense.
It's more of the same and worse. And that's where it gets kind of rough. Now, since this episode came out, I have seen a lot more, like, I've done more research just generally on Star Trek stuff. And one thing is, so listening to the 50-Year Mission, Ed Gross, friend of the Men of Steel Pod's book on an oral history of Star Trek, they talk about how this was actually kind of in the works even before we get the Next Gen movies, even before we get Next Gen the show. There was this idea for a Star Trek Academy movie that would have recast everyone as younger people in their Academy years and doing that story. So that concept had been floating around the Paramount Studios for, at this point, like 30 years.
Wow. I mean, I can believe it. I mean, like, I'm not gonna belie Insurrection or but because it had its moments, moments worth going through puberty was kind of hilarious, but I can kind of see why that wasn't something that they were just jumping to green light.
Yeah, there was a lot of, like, friction on that one because, you know, like, also, we have to remember, Roddenberry was still alive at the time, and there was lots of competing ideas in terms of who was actually running this whole show. So, but the point is that it's an idea that they had that they wanted to do, and so you can kind of see how that evolved over time. Like, you know, I'm not saying that any of those drafts had anything to do with, like, the ultimate script, but certainly producers involved were aware of this idea of, hey, we had this idea for, we're going to do young Kirk, Spock, and Bones. Let's bring that back. Let's dust off that concept and, like, put a lot of polish. And they got J.J. Abrams, who puts so much polish on
so
horror.
Much polish. It's almost all polish. It's like he didn't even mop the floor. He just put wax on top of it.
Yeah, just more and more. Just more wax.
Just more wax. And not necessarily this movie, because this movie had a little more balance than some of his other films. But that was not like a pointed clearing of my throat. I just want to say that. I really did have to clear my throat. I wasn't throwing shade. But I do think that, like, it gets harder and harder to build something, you know, with a good foundation when your first foundation is not. It doesn't even have to be airtight. It just has to be slightly better than this.
Yeah, the whole world of the Kelvinverse doesn't make sense. Like, everything about it just kind of like falls apart. And then you get into the actual timeline of this movie, which is even more batshit insane. So this week I made a reference to my wife to Starship Troopers, and she was like, "Oh, I actually don't think I've ever seen that." And I was like, "We must have seen that together at some point." And then I realized, oh, you must have fallen asleep before the movie even started, because she agreed to watch it with me, and it was an eye-opening experience for her. But rewatching it, thinking about this movie coming up for it, like, that movie does a lot of similar things in terms of timeline. There is a very rapid rise from high school through the ranks of military into positions of authority. In one character's case, as the captain of a ship.
Yeah.
Another character is like an admiral by the end of it all. So they're doing a lot of that stuff. And now the point of that movie is to show, you know, this fascist police state using fear of the unknown as a way of suppressing individual freedoms, and how people are indoctrinated into this whole thing. And so we see this progression of a character who's supposed to be a senior in high school to being like the most diehard, like, right wing, like lieutenant in effectively their army,
Right.
by the end of it all. And it's supposed to be like dwelling on that whole thing. Like, there's a scene later in the movie where it's like the recruits that show up as reinforcements are like very clearly cast as like very young people, whereas like the high school students at the beginning of the movie are like these actors who are like 30.
Right.
And it's like, oh man, like we're the old men now. And it's like, yeah, you've always been the fucking old men, guys. And now that movie, I think, is way smarter than this one, just in general.
Absolutely.
And it's doing a different thing, but that's kind of the movie that I wish we had done in terms, at least, of the timeline for these actors. Like, it is really weird that they're just all of a sudden the ranks on the ship that they're supposed to be when we get to the show, when it's like, wait, aren't you all technically still at the academy?
Yeah, it's really, they're just all there on this new ship already, but they're in their place, and that is kind of odd.
Yeah, and it's like very much just don't think about it, but like, Christ, guys, like, you're not doing us any favors in terms of having us not pay attention to that part.
Yeah, it all feels very awkwardly rushed, and I think Paul did make a good point in saying, like, you have this person who's a dropout who then becomes captain, and how would anyone else feel, right? Like
Yeah.
anyone else, everybody else, like, he specifically spoke about Zulu, but everyone else on that ship graduated. Like, so even someone who worked in like the lower decks graduated. Like, you know, so like I feel like Paul makes a very solid statement there in the episode we just listened to. It's just like little things, like, oh, he's such a rebel, and he's so outside of the lines, and like it's like, that's ultimate privilege, sir. Like, what?
Yeah, it's super broken. I mean,
My dad was a captain, so I'd be a great captain.
well, that is the J.J. Abrams way, isn't it? Well, and it's wild, though, because Kirk's actual history in Star Trek lore prior to that point isn't that different from that, in that he became the commanding officer of the Hyperion when the majority of the deck crew was killed by, I think it was like an alien parasite.
Right.
And so there is actually a story that is kind of similar. And to say, like, oh, he was on the Enterprise instead of the Hyperion isn't insane to do if you wanted to do something like that. But it's still, he's not supposed to be the actual captain. He's the acting captain. And there's like, and the fact that it's all the same people that would, be on the ship is crazy. Like, it feels like a weird fan fiction kind of thing here.
I mean, honestly, wouldn't it have been more interesting to see like underling Kirk, like, be on the Hyperion and just act out that story? Like,
Yeah.
To me, that would have been much more interesting, because like, it also would have given like a little more room for second movie and, you know, others.
Right.
So that we're not like just remaking old episodes, but like giving room for a new universe to live, even though it's the same characters. And again, that's like part of my thing when JJ takes on these big projects, because he did the same thing with Star Wars. You know, it's kind of like he knows the formula that works, and he goes, okay, well, we're going to do that because that's what the fans will like. And then he kind of duplicates that, puts some wax on it, some shine and sparkle, and like tweaks a couple of things here and there. And I just feel like this series would have been, and the cast too, would have been just better served if, like, you know, maybe you have him just with one person, you know, like one of the main characters in that first movie, and then you have him on the Enterprise with everyone else. You know, maybe not introduce everyone first movie. But, you know, that doesn't scratch the nostalgia itch, I guess.
Right, yeah, like the movie, they wanted to get back to the status quo of the original series, but they, like, jumped the gun so much, it's weird. Also, we say JJ a lot, but I do also want to put, like, some of the onus on the writers, which are Robert Orci and Alex Kurtzman, because neither of them are writers that I like all that much. I think that JJ, as the producer and director, should have reined them in on all the things that don't make any fucking sense in this movie. Mm-hmm. So it is ultimately on him, but like as a writing team, the fact that none of the pieces fit together, but you find the movie fun, like that is J.J. Abrams succeeding at making what is objectively a bad script with good moments a fun movie, even if it's not a great movie.
I concur. I'm sorry, JJ. We're not going to just blame you. Writers!
Well, and it's funny because, like, you know, we said at the beginning, like, the goal is not to be, like, that negative, but, like, we're, like, there is negativity to express towards this movie. And again, I still enjoy it. It is interesting now in 2023 looking at it where we've gotten more Star Trek material since then. Like, this was the rebirth of Trek as a franchise that Paramount cared about prior to this point. And there's some weirdness in terms of, like, with Paul and me and, like, the general vibes of the time. Like, Paramount hadn't done anything. So prior to the 09 Star Trek, the property was fallow. They basically gave carte blanche to, like, fan groups to do stuff. And so, like, there was a thriving community up until 09. And then 09, there was like a little bit of restrictions that they started putting in terms of like what rights you had. Mm-hmm. Paul alluded to Phase 2, which was like the continuation of New Voyages that actually had like a little bit of the blessing of Paramount. And then that kind of got shut down. And then right when this episode was recorded, they had actually put out the guidelines that we are currently under, which was to limit some of the parasitic fan groups that are out there. Not to name names, but people who raised a lot of money and then never actually put anything out.
That's not good.
No, it's not good. It was also like making things look bad. And it happened right when they had announced at this point Discovery, but nothing had really come out. Or if it did, like maybe an episode or two. Yeah. It like super early in the run of Discovery at this point, if it even had been out there at this point.
Right.
But we knew Star Trek was coming. Versus now, a lot of Star Trek has come out. Like, Discovery is concluding its run soon. Picard is in the midst of its final season. We've got stuff like Lower Decks, which is great.
I love it. Great.
And we've got Strange New Worlds.
I love that.
And Strange New Worlds is doing exactly what Paul said he didn't care about, which I find hilarious, which is a Pike-centered show.
I do think that's funny, too, because when I heard him say it, I was like, Strange New Worlds has been my favorite. Like don't get me wrong, I actually really do enjoy Discovery. I just think that, like, every week it's, like, something, and I feel like my anxiety is always at, like, a 10 watching it. And then Picard makes me sad, and Lower Decks makes me laugh, like, so much, but sometimes it makes me kind of be like, you know, kind of gives me secondhand embarrassment. So, like, for me, Strange New World is, like, right in the center, and it's, like, just pitch perfect for me.
Yeah, Strange New World is so good.
I feel like one of those three little bears. This one's too anxiety inducing. And this chair makes me too sad. And this chair makes me feel embarrassed. But this chair's just right.
Yeah. It's so good. And it has, like, all the right balances of things where it's like, oh, yeah, it is the Enterprise. It's really cool. You get that sense of discovery that feels, like, really big and out there and awesome. Like, that humanity is going to do something really cool with it all. And it has the trappings of the original series, but allowing for it to be a little bit different. And there's some skewed stuff going on there. Like,
Yeah.
it's really it is the spiritual successor to what this movie was trying to do, and succeeding way more in terms of the actual like continuity. That like, I realize that like continuity can be a chain that like restricts storytelling, but fuck, man, Star
Yeah.
Trek is kind of built on having like a cohesive world that like lots of nerds care about.
I agree. And here's the thing. And like you said, we kind of talked about the things we had to complain about. I am grateful to this film, and I want to say again, I did enjoy it. I do love this cast. I think that they breathed life into these characters, and they did a good job at, with the work that they had. They did a great job. What was in front of them and what was on the page. But I love that it did bring, I think that it was successful in bringing people who were not formally very familiar with Star Trek, and bringing them into the fold, and like bringing them into enjoying it, and so that makes these future projects that much more likely to happen, right? And so we do have to give credit to the film for doing that, despite the continuity issues in the writing that definitely should have been fixed. But this is like a fun world, and if this is like playing on TV, like if I'm like flipping through channels and it's playing on TV, like I'll watch it. Or like if I'm like doing laundry and I need something in the background, I might put it on Paramount, like, and just let it run, because it's like, it's fun. Does it always make sense? No. But it's fun.
Yeah. And I think when this episode was recorded, it was even before Beyond came out. I can't remember exactly, but it like Beyond, I loved. I thought that was a fantastic entry in this franchise.
Yeah.
That really had the fun and like sense of exploration and optimism of the series, and had gotten over the hurdles of the first two Abrams movies. And part of that is the script, like the fact that we had like Star Trek fans who like really cared about Star Trek, even under a lot of pressure to write it. And so, maybe Beyond would be a good episode for like a fifth episode, because it was they had to scrap a script and totally rewrite it at very last minute. So like that would be a lot of fun.
I will look forward to it.
Yeah,
because it's a reason to watch it.
Yeah, well, and it's like there's flaws in it certainly, but like it gets way more right than wrong, and I think it really gets the casts into the right positions. Like everyone on that movie, like any issues you had with like Chris Pine as Kirk, like I think by the time you get to Beyond, that's gone. Like he's nailed it. Versus here, there's still some like rough edges on it all. Like obviously Quinto as Spock is really good, but also like Peck as Spock on Strange New Worlds has been really good. Like I think
he's
Spock
been so good.
might be easier to cast than we had originally.
I know. I think we just like, because Leonard Nimoy is Leonard Nimoy. Like there's just this feeling like, oh, no one else could do that, and then like, we have these two other actors that are cast, and they're absolutely wonderful, and you still love Spock. And it's like, oh, it might just be the spirit of the character. Like, and it's not that they didn't get it right. Like, I'm not taking this away from Quinto or anyone else, right? But it's like, yeah, maybe it's just Spock. Maybe he just has magic. Like that character, and just like how wonderful he is. Just people just get it.
Yeah, or maybe we just cast two amazing actors, and the fact that we've had three now amazing actors playing the part are incredible. So
yeah, maybe that's it.
Yeah, and like Carl Urban as Bones, like fucking so good, so good,
the best. I love him so much. I love him in everything, but especially this.
But I think the strongest points going on for this movie are the fact that we're calling back to the nostalgia of the original series that had really good characters with really interesting relationships in a really cool setting, and then you add in an excuse to kind of like revel in it all in this movie, and that like that's all cool.
Yeah.
And even the stuff that's bad that Abrams does, like the Enterprise being built on Earth, like the shot itself is really cool. So like, there's a lot of reasons to have like big positive feelings, even if your head's being like, what the fuck are you doing? And like, even if they don't nail some of the other stuff, like Nurse Chapel isn't there. And like, the Uhura Spock romance is like weird. And like all those things that they're putting in there that you're like, what? Wait, hold on. What? Like, again, JJ has everything be so shiny and the shots be so visually appealing, even if they're not necessarily like saying a lot, like, and the motion's really good in a way that, like, you know, coming off of like the Star Wars prequels, for example, all the walk and talks in there are less interesting than anything from West Wing. And it's like, how the fuck are the space samurai like less interesting for their walk and talks than like a scene from like a mid-budget like TV drama? And then this movie, they're all running. There's so much energy. There's so much momentum.
Yeah.
There's so much kinetic like focus in each scene that's awesome. And
yeah, it's amazing. Also, can I just say, like, we brought back Winona Ryder. Like, before this, she hadn't done anything in a while since she had, you know, basically had to take a break from acting. And so I was really happy to see her because I loved her.
Yeah, and I thought, I mean, like, it's an easy play to be like, oh, death of the mother kind of story. Like, that's obviously going to pull at your heartstrings. The same way that the death of the father, you know, like, tragic sacrifice scene at the beginning, which also, this movie arguably is a reason why, like, Chris Hemsworth gets the part of Thor. And thank God.
Absolutely. He's fantastic as Thor, and yes. It's like the best. He's like on screen for like 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, and he's great in that role.
And people are like, what?
Like, this movie has two of the best Chris's.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And I would say that Chris Pine at this point is still like a little undercooked. Like, he eventually gets there to like why people love him so much, and like, but like, this movie's not the reason why people love him so much. If Kirk or his role as Kirk is a reason to love him, it's Star Trek Beyond, where he, like, I think really comes into the part. But you know, Chris Hemsworth really nails it in this movie, being a very brief character who we have alluded to a lot because he's just the dad of Captain Kirk, but like really does a great job.
and it's such an incredibly like moving moment, you know, like it's just like, gets you.
Yeah.
Just gets you. And because that's like the opening, it's kind of sets the tone, which is, you know, nice, you know, like, oh, we're in here for drama and emotions. And we do get that.
Yeah.
Just with plot holes.
Right. And part of what carries that scene so well is that the score in this movie is also really good. It's a totally new score for Star Trek that has like a couple of hooks that like go back to the original theme, but you know, it's not alluding to the next gen or the motion picture or the Wrath of Khan score. We're not doing anything quite like that. It's totally new in style. It's very optimistic. I think that music is a really big thing that makes this movie work. And I don't think we really talked about that in the episode.
Yeah, no, it's got amazing. It also swells at just the right moment, and you're right. It's so optimistic, and I think that's what keeps you going through all these adrenaline shot scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, like especially like when the escape pods are leaving the Kelvin at the beginning of the movie, like the way the notes just start coming in, and it kind of has this like sort of like playful feeling as they're escaping, and you kind of like get you get that, oh hey, the tragedy of this is there, but it's also an adventure, and that I think is so cool.
Yeah.
Now, that said, is the product placement kind of annoying? Yeah. Is the fact that they used a Budweiser facility for their warp core kind of annoying? Yeah. I mean, it's true that, like, time heals all wounds, so, like, a lot of the gripes about this movie are less egregious when you have had, now at this point now, 2 full movies since then, and also a bunch of really high-budget TV shows that have, like, amazing production values. So, like, you know, a movie that's, like, kind of mid is not going to really like bother me nearly as much as it would when it's the second most recent film in the franchise.
And I think also it probably softens the resentment, or not full resentment, gosh, just the criticism is softened a little bit when you can reflect and go, okay, but at least it kind of kickstarted things back up again. So we get all these other things. And so, like, was it the best? No, but because it was okay, because it was pretty good and it was fun with a good cast that people were drawn to, we got more stuff. And, like, that kind of softens also some of those other things, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was fun to revisit. It's been a wild couple of years, obviously, for all the stuff in the world, but I've been able to see Paul a lot recently because we're working on a Star Trek thing again. 'Cause we're doing Farragut Forward, which is set in the Wrath of Khan era, and so it is doing some really fun stuff. Like, the production values on what we are doing right now are really competitive. I don't want to say competitive with this, but like really competitive with what stuff that people are putting out on web series now, and especially like higher budget stuff. So it's really cool that Star Trek has so much life to it, and that we're able to work on these things, and that like that there are fans out there that are able to keep it alive in all the different ways. Which we also were like a little unsure of like what the future of Star Trek fan communities were going to be when this episode was recorded. So like there was also a little bit of like a grudge about all that. Whereas like now Paramount's kind of made it clear, like, no, we really just were like going after the people who were like clearly scamming people's money and like making us look bad as a result.
Right. As they should, because those people are wrong to do that.
I mean, I don't want to like be like, oh yeah, Paramount's great, like, because
Yeah.
not saying that, but
no, but I'm saying in this case, at the very least, right? They did the right thing.
Yeah, and yeah. So I'm feeling really good about the franchise. I think that when this episode was recorded, we all had just gone through a lot of very emotional stuff behind the scenes, just because like we had just finished up Starship Farragut, and it felt like it was being wrested away from us, and the fact that it's not so much, and that the series that they've put out have actually been really good, that they're not just putting out like popcorn movies trying to compete with like Marvel is a really good spot to be in right now. So the franchise feels like in a pretty good shape, with a lot of fan community support, and like I don't want to say a blind eye, because like they're aware of it. Like we put like, it's a Star Trek fan film on our thing, but the relationship is a lot more positive than it felt like it was going to be at the time that this episode was recorded. So it's a cool spot to be in. I'm really glad that to still be able to talk Trek. Like, it's such a fun franchise, and like they're doing really good things with it now. And I think a lot of the fans that were like concerned about like the early like about Discovery and about like all that, like they're still out there, and there's still some toxic fandom, but I think that all the series have kind of like course corrected from the issues that they had, so we're in a good space.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, listen, I think that wherever there are people, there might be some toxicity.
Yes.
So I just think that it's just nice to be able to have fandom and be able to have new stuff and have stuff, and then sometimes you just need to take a break from fandom and just don't like everything, so it disappears from your page. Just don't even pay attention to it. Just like what you like. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we talked about this one. I'm really glad to hear your thoughts on it, because we've definitely talked about it privately, but I don't think under the structure of an episode before.
Yeah.
So like it's nice to kind of go back to that one. It's going to be a little while before we get to the Star Trek Into Darkness episode, which I will warn everyone is a long episode. It was me and Brett Eagleston one-on-one just talking Star Trek for a really long time, and Brett and I can get into a really good vibe when we talk, but like I think it was like a 2-hour episode.
Well, I would expect nothing less. We're going to go into darkness on that one.
Yeah, but in the meantime, so this was really fun. Audio quality next time is going to be a bit better because it was recorded with Ben and Addie in studio, so that part is really good. The next time we talk about an old episode, we'll be talking about both Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. Which I'm excited to talk about, if only because Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man has had a bit of a reckoning thanks to No Way Home. So I think that'll be kind of cool. And but yeah, like we're at like Spider-Man's also a property that's kind of in a good place right now. So some of the toxicity I felt about the lesser entries in the franchise at that point aren't really going to play a part now, and so I'm kind of excited just to sort of revisit them both. It's wild that we did both in the same one. Like, what a waste. Like, why?
There's so much to talk about, and you were like, we're gonna shove these together.
Well, especially because it's so much fun to do a sequel where you're stuck with the first one, and I'm like, why did we do both at the same time? And I think I just didn't want to deal with it.
Fair enough.
And we kind of just rushed into it all. So, well, I don't know. Looking forward to that. So as far as the main show goes, last time we had That Thing You Do, and following that, we've got oh God, we've got the Dungeons and Dragons episode coming up.
But don't worry, guys. In the middle of that, it'll be Highlander 2, The Quickening.
Right. Well, but you know what the crazy part is on the in terms of just our timing, because this was not planned. We did time Dungeons and Dragons to come out when the Dungeons and Dragons movie comes out, but this is also a Chris Pine movie.
Yes.
So this is actually kind of perfect, and I didn't plan that. That's
amazing.
Just wonderful
That's actually
timing.
really great. I love it. It's basically Chris Pine made it happen. He put it into the universe.
Yeah, and he's an actor that I
with
have
his
come to
flip
like a lot
phone
more.
because
Yes.
he doesn't have a smartphone.
Well, that's just a smart man.
Yeah. He
It's
just
weird.
doesn't own one.
It's weird to be like envious of Chris Pine because I forget if I mentioned in this episode, back when they first were looking to make this movie, they reached out to Star Trek fan film groups to see if they had anyone they wanted to put in for Kirk. Like that, it was a long shot, but they still wanted to like reach out and just see if anyone was like up for it. And I was my name and headshot was submitted. And like I never had an audition or anything like that, but I did like send in like a video audition, but it was like crude because it was 2008 at the time.
Right.
So I always was like a little bit like, ooh, that could have been me. Now, obviously, Chris Pine already had credits. He was already a real actor, whereas I had been an extra in some stuff and then had like a couple of lines in a few Star Trek fan films. Like, what?
Yeah.
But there always was like that little bit of it. But like, yeah, no, I see it. Like he's...
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's great. One of my favorite TikToks is just a girl who picks pictures of Chris Pine, and she says he dresses like a bisexual lesbian, and she just finds his best outfits on his days off, and she's not wrong. It's great. He just wears whatever he wants. I love him for that.
Well, he's definitely aged better than I have. So, again, hats off to you, Paramount. You picked the right one. Not that I was ever seriously in the running. I just need to be very clear about that. I don't honestly think he took my role. Unlike friend of the show Justin Liebergen and his relationship with Miles Teller, where like, that's some stank.
Fair.
In a much better world we would have been in if Justin had been in all the parts that Miles Teller had been cast in.
Agree. Hard agree.
Especially Fan Four Stick. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Agree.
Yeah, much better world.
Much better world.
But what are you going to do?
That's actually the timeline we should have been in.
That's the Kelvin timeline that we want to be in.
To avoid the last 6 years. There's no COVID in that timeline.
Somehow, yeah. Somehow.
That's the one piece of the butterfly effect. If only we can go back in time. Make sure that Justin gets that role.
Yeah. Oh God, it was like some stupid party movie. I forget what it was called, but it was like one of Teller's like earliest parts, and it was just like some dumb like found footage style, like everyone's going wild at this party house type thing movie. I don't know. Anyway, I'll probably cut this part. Maybe not. It might be funny.
Maybe it's we are at the end. I was going to say an end credit. This is the end.
Well, it might go post. Anyway, so like I said, next time we are going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons. The most recent episode is That Thing You Do. You should check those out because those are both great. We had Keith from We Have Issues and Jukebox Vertigo on for That Thing You Do. And we've got Katie and Ben over from Amateur-ish Productions, who are doing amazing stuff with tabletop D&D stuff over on their Twitch channel, and they are starting a podcast soon with all of that very, very cool stuff. Like, just awesome people, great conversations for both. So I hope you check out all of that. And yeah, until next time, pass it on.
Yeah, pass it on.
Yay, breaks. Cool. This is for Case.
This is for Case.
The episode goes here, everyone. Please.
The episode goes right here, Case. Just in case you're sleep deprived when you're doing all this stuff.
I will in all likelihood be nursing a child while I'm editing this episode. So
yeah, that makes sense.
not nursing, well, not lactating.
Giving her a bottle.
Yes.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah. Although it's not that weird for grown men to lactate in times of extreme emotional stress.
That's true. It can happen.
Hello, wonderful listener. Pat Edwards here, co-host of the Let's Rewatch podcast on this very network. For those of you who don't know me, I'm an author and a game designer. Specifically, I work in the tabletop role-playing gaming industry. Well, I recently co-founded a production studio called Storytellers Forge, our first big book launch has arrived. The Black Ballad is a brutal and bloody TTRPG adventure that answers the question, what happens when the heroes die? Easily adaptable to multiple gaming systems, including 5th edition D&D, The Black Ballad is the perfect campaign to start after a total party kill. We are immensely proud of this epic tome and have assembled a stellar team of collaborators. The Black Ballad features a soundtrack by Dia Morte, downloadable NPC audio snippets recorded by Carlos Ferro from Gears of War and Assassin's Creed, and some truly gorgeous illustrations spearheaded by our art director James Masingo from Borderlands 2 and Shadowrun. Our crowdfunding campaign goes live March 7th on BackerKit, and I would be grateful beyond measure if you would consider ordering a copy of The Black Ballad today.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com